Alright, so we ended last week with kind of just going over more of like a simple trace, maybe like a logo or something like that. But a question we get a lot of times is tracing like faces, converting them to like a black and white image and everything like that. So you actually have those features in CorelDRAW. So you will, I believe, have to have, when you install Corel, the full graphics suite that we use. It will come with a paint version of Corel, so I'm pretty sure you have to have that installed in order to use some of the effects we're going to use tonight, such as the black and white. So if you don't have that feature, but you have the full graphics suite, you might just have to reinstall the Corel paint. But I'm not 100% sure if the black and white is part of that or not. So right now we have our picture. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to focus on just the part that we want to trace. So to do that, we're going to select our crop tool, and we're going to just crop just the part of the design that we want to trace. So I can go ahead and to crop, just in case we didn't cover, I'm not sure if I covered this last week, when you have a bunch of different stuff on your page like this, if you just simply grab the crop tool, throw it over your design here, and you'll see that box I just drew. If you do a double click on a double left click, it's going to crop your image out and just leave you with your design here. But you can notice how it gets rid of everything else on your page. So while you're working, let's say you want to actually keep everything that we have here. If you select your image first, so you can see I have my image selected, and then use the same crop tool, it only gets rid of the rest of that image instead of everything else on your page. And we just had a question, is there a way to see the comments? So you actually won't be able to see the comments from other people, but as they come in, I'll try to answer and read off as many as possible. Right. Now, once we have our image here, what we could do is, in this design, I kind of want to keep the background, as you can see here. So I don't necessarily want to trace just her head out. But if I didn't want the background coming through, the next part would be taking your B-spline and actually doing a trace, kind of like we did last week with just the simple silhouette. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to be a black and white image, but you want to, try to get it as nice as possible. So, just kind of going around like the design like this, and just kind of capturing the part you want. So if I didn't want the complete background, I would trace over just like that. I could highlight both, and then up top here we're going to do the intersect. And what that does is when I remove my trace, or where I had that trace, it will just pull that from our design. So if I just needed, if I just wanted a black and white image of just the head like this, I would use the B-spline, trace that part out that I wanted, highlight both, and then that's just going to be the intersect tool. And then where that trace was, we'll simply pull right from your design. So I'll leave this here just so we can see it, but what I actually want to do is use this full square that I have here. So next I'm going to go to my bitmaps. I'm going to drop down to mode, and you're going to see a black and white option. So we'll go ahead and select that. And you're going to have a few different options in your conversion method. So you can kind of drop through and see all the different ones. We're most likely, unless, depending on what type of finished product you're looking for, we're always going to most likely use the first one, which would be line art. So this threshold that we have down here, the higher you go, the more detail we'll start to see in our design. So this is where you can actually, if you click on this bar, you can use the up and down arrow on your keyboard, and you can see over here how this number is just going up one at a time. So we want to get a lot of detail, or as much detail in this design as possible, but if we go too much, then it starts to look like that. So in this part, we're just trying to find that perfect, where we have enough detail in our design where we can tell, what we're trying to trace, and we don't, so it might be around the middle area. Some designs you might come, a little bit higher. So it's really going to depend on the design and picture that's taken, where there's no like default, okay, 125 is a great number. So it's just going to depend on your design and then, the picture and the quality that it's taken in. So once you find a good point, we'll just stick with 125. We're going to hit OK. So that's going to bring in my entire design just like that. So this one here, if I did the same thing, mode, black and white, okay, you can see that it might show, and I'll show you that again, it might show the entire design in the black and white, the same box, but it's not going to take anything that's behind it. So only what we captured is what it's going to show in our design here. So when we do the black and white feature, right now this is still an image. And do we know how to tell if it's an image or not compared to like a vector? So yeah, there's a couple ways. Line view, which I'm assuming you mean wireframe, is a good way to tell. Yeah, at the top when you have your design selected, you'll still see the edit and trace bitmap, so that's a good way to know as well. But also too, when you move this around, when I left click and hold this design, it's that gray box. So that's going to tell you right away where you don't actually see any cut lines or anything like that. That just solid or light gray box. That lets us know that this is still an image. And wireframe, it's going to show you the design still, but the actual cut or the line is just the outside of this box. So if you try to send that through or anything like that right now, it's simply just going to read the outside of this box. All right, so there's a couple different ways to know. So yeah, the easiest is probably if you click on it and you see trace or edit bitmap, right away you'll know that this isn't a actual design yet, that this is still an image. So from this point, it's the same thing we did last week. So we just hit trace bitmap, outline, and then again, it doesn't matter which one, even though we did line art for the black and white, it doesn't matter from this point. What we're looking for now is just the best results. So we'll switch through each one of these drop downs. Obviously now that loses a lot of detail, so we don't want that one. Detail logo, that one's not too bad. Clip art, that gives us a little bit more. Low quality, high quality. So maybe between the high quality or the line art probably looks the best. So we'll just go with the high quality. Now sometimes when you have a black and white image like this, if you hit remove background and automatically choose, because that black's there, it's thinking that that whole black is the background. So you might have to uncheck that for this case here. You can specify the color you want removed, so you can just take all the white and we can leave it like that because we actually just want the leftover of this black design. So that's how I would set it up, where we specify the color, remove it from an entire image, and we just get that white out of there. So now when we're done, we can hit OK. And now when I move this around, a couple things. One, you can see the blue lines. So that lets us know that this is a vectorized design now. And then two, when I click on it, it doesn't say, trace bitmap or anything up top there. It just has an ungrouped, which usually tells me that it's, a group of vectors or a vectorized design. And your leftover is just going to be right here. So when you're done, you can hit delete. And then we're done with that. All right, so our piece here should all just be the solid black. So I can hit ungroup and weld. And now that's just one solid piece just like that. All right, so that's our nice black and white trace. Now to go a step further like we did here, all I did for that was we selected our text tool. Go ahead and write out our text. We can go ahead and just choose the font we want. I'll make this, just add a little color so we can see it real quick. And then what I did here is I just lined these up to the edges. Go to our contour tool, and then I just add a little contour to the outside. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and take our B-spline, and I'm just going to draw two lines. And I'm going to go ahead and make those a little bit thicker. So that's going to be our drop down right here. And we'll probably make them closer to 1. Now we've shown this a couple times. Right now, these are just lines. So you can see how thick they are here. When I go to my wireframe, you can see that they're just a line. So when I want these actually converted to the lines you see here, do we remember what button we're going to click? So right here on our, convert outline to object. Perfect. So right here on our TRW toolbar, you'll have the button laid out for you here. So we'll left click, and now you can see how these are actually the same thickness of how we set those up. So I'm just going to weld those together. Go ahead and center that, and then center my design there. And does everyone know how to center in Corel with just one letter? Perfect. So a lot of people are answering correctly. So it's just going to be the letter P. P as in Paul. So wherever your design is, you could have all three of these in random places. When you highlight your objects and hit the letter P as in Paul, wherever your workspace is, it'll center everything right to it. So we can just set that down there. Let's make this just a tad bit smaller. Now for the rest of the design, we're just going to use our SmartFill. So we covered the SmartFill last week too. So wherever we click, and that's why I put these bars up here. These bars are going to prevent it from going into the other side. So these little pieces, and actually before we do that, what we're going to do first is, you see how we have a lot of these really jagged areas throughout our design? So that's not going to be fun to cut, especially if I show the nodes. You can see all those little nodes, so that's not going to be fun to cut. And some of them have kind of weird cut lines and stuff like that. So from some of the tools we used last week, does anyone know a quick way to clean all this up? Exactly. Carol, you answered it before I even asked. Yeah, so we want to use the smooth tool. So up top here, it's going to highlight first, you're going to see the shape tool. So if I left click and hold, we're going to see the smooth tool. So this is the circle up here. So you might need to adjust it. My design's pretty small, and that's why the circle looks so big. So you can either make your design larger or your circle smaller in relative to your design size. So we're going to select the smooth tool. I'm going to left click on the blue part of my design, so that's selecting that part. That's telling it I want to use the smooth tool on this part of my design, and I'm just going to left click and hold. So you'll see that how it just starts to smooth those out. So up top here I have this rate set to 81, so that's pretty fast. So if that's too quick with these edits, you can slow it down and you can hold it a little bit longer before it makes such like drastic changes. So we want to just smooth those out. That's going to really help with our cuts. Now, if you hold it too much, it's going to really shape the way your design looks. So we don't want to go crazy with it. So we're just going to kind of go around, use it on this design. Now, the small areas, when you left click again, you'll see these little nodes. That's where I go around and I'll try to close those off, because it's really hard for cutter and to weed those little pieces. That's almost where you kind of forget about them, and one design will have it, the next one won't. So I try to just kind of get rid of those if possible. We don't want to get rid of all the little pieces, just because some of it does add a little detail, like up here and stuff like that. And it's easier to cut and leave something like this than to weed out all these little pieces like that. So I would rather get rid of stuff like this than little pieces like that, because these I have to go back and like kind of pick out and weed, where the other ones aren't as bad. So we're just going to use the smooth tool, go around, and little things like this we want to kind of make sure that they're fixed too, that we don't have any weird cut lines. So, you know, spend a little time, especially when we use the trace feature, to just go around and make sure it looks alright. So everything looks pretty good there. So now I can go back and use my SmartFill. So I'm just going to SmartFill these little areas here. Alright, so when I'm done with that middle color, or that color there, I can switch my fill color. So I'm just left clicking on these little pieces. So the bar, the reason we set up these bars is because that's kind of, once it hits that bar, it won't fill past that point. So that's why I put them in there as a nice little divider for our design here. So then again, we'll change it to a third color. And I'm going to leave that little piece uncovered. That way I can just select that and hit delete. Actually, before I do that too, no, actually I can just delete those, delete that out too, and then delete my text. Is there a fast way to highlight the area and let it fill rather than to select them? No, with the SmartFill, unfortunately, you'll have to click on each individual object. So now I'm just going to select by the same color on the wizard and just weld those real quick. Now this here, to grab or to create a rectangle shape just around my design here, if you highlight your design, hold shift and double click the rectangle tool, it'll put a rectangle around your design just like that. So now we can just do red, we'll do a light gray as our white, and then blue. Go a little bit darker. So just like that, we're able to create our design. Any questions on the trace feature? All right. Question, what are you pressing to zoom in and out so quickly? So just the zoom, I actually went over it last week a little bit. If you have a mouse that has like the scroll on it, it should be set to zoom, but if you use the scroll, it will zoom in and out. As you scroll up, it'll zoom in. As you scroll out, it'll zoom out. Now, what it's not going to do is zoom to like the middle of your page. It's going to zoom or unzoom to where your mouse is. I don't know if unzoom or zoom out if unzoom even a word, but when you zoom out, wherever your mouse is, that's kind of where it's going to go. So if I want to zoom into my design here and my mouse is way over here and I start to scroll up, you can notice how it goes away from my design. So wherever whatever you're trying to zoom into, you just have to put your mouse on top of it, and then you can zoom in and out a little bit quicker. And one question we get a lot too is when we do zoom in, sometimes like we'll get stuck or we just want to focus on this page, but it's not completely, set up right. Where if you just come up here and go to 2 page, it usually zooms in pretty nicely right to the middle of your work area. And the page, what that is this little background that we had here. So when you can zoom way out to page, and then it'll center that right for you. Any other questions before we move on to the envelopes? All right. All right, so now we're going to move to the envelopes. So under Effects, you'll have the Envelope tool. If you're working with the TRW software, this little button right here, when you highlight over, it'll say Envelope Docker Window. That's going to open up the same window. So you can click that here, or again, just right there. So if it's check mark, it's already opened on the side. Sometimes it might be hidden. So if you just double click it like that, or just click it once, it will open up with your envelope settings. All right. Yes, this webinar will be available later. So usually it takes us less than pretty much about 24 hours to get them up. So it will be right up on our YouTube channel. Yeah, with the SmartFill, we did have one question about that too. Sometimes when you're using the SmartFill, if you just create a bar or a line like we did here, and I'll just kind of move this over. Now this is just a thin line here. So to get that kind of gap that we had in our second one here, I actually made the lines a little bit thicker. So sometimes if you don't actually make your lines a little thicker and convert them to an object, sometimes it might give you like a weird feel. So let's see if I can get it. Of course now it's working pretty perfect. But sometimes this line, it will kind of bleed through and it might try to fill up your whole page. So if you're working on a design and you're using the SmartFill and for some reason it fills the entire object or something like that, or if you click outside and your whole page goes to whatever color you have filled, what that means is just that there's an open area somewhere. So if I click out into this main area, it just wants to fill everything. So when you're working in a design like this, if it bleeds into something else or doesn't fill correctly, it's most likely there's some type of an opening. And that's why sometimes by just adding a little bit of a thickness to this line and converting it to an object, it prevents any of that from happening. And it always does have to be on the top layer. So you can notice here, I'll make this kind of a green so we can see it. It's on the top layer of everything. So if it's behind, like this, it's not, the SmartFill is not going to do anything for us. It's just going to fill just that area there. Hey Peggy, welcome. All right. So now we'll just get into some of the envelope features. So I'll start out with just kind of our rectangle shape and go through the different envelope styles. If you watched any of our text effects videos, now that's something that we have in our software, but you can actually create your own envelope shapes using like rectangles and stuff like that, and upload them into the software. So if you don't have the software and you just want to shape text or anything like that, the envelope tool is how we're going to do that. All right. So when you have your shape selected, you'll see everything actually lit up. So if you don't have anything selected and you have the envelope tool open, it's just going to be all grayed out, kind of like you see here. So when we actually select it, it'll say add new, add preset, and then kind of have our different envelope styles, our shapes down here. So we have our options, I should say. So we have our straight line, our single arc, our double arc, our unconstrained. And with the putty and all this, it's not going to really matter too much. We're going to pretty much stick with the putty when we're working with our text and stuff like that. You don't have to keep lines. You don't have to leave that. You can just leave it as it is. So the straight line option, we can pretty much hit add new. And when we do that, you'll see these boxes around our design pop up. So the straight line is simply just going to give us just a nice straight edge, no matter how we kind of shape this. Now, even though our line here might be straight, you can see how the object behind it does have a curve to it. Usually when we add or use this with a text, and you'll see that in a little, it actually does keep it more of a straight line. So even if you see something like this, if I put like a text field in there, usually it would hold a little bit straighter than kind of the rectangle is showing. So same with if I bring this middle up here, again, it kind of rounds it, but in reality, if that's a text field, it's going to look a little bit better. So we had a question, can you add an envelope that shows up in the box like the preset? So yeah, here we have the presets. So this will shape your, let's go ahead and just add a text real quick so we can see that. The presets are nice. So we can go to add preset, and you can kind of see the shape that it wants to add your text to. So when you're highlighting over these, it's not actually going to apply the shape or apply the change until you hit the apply button. So something like that, I can just hit apply and it will rotate my text just like that. Now I still do have control over it, so if I want to change it anymore, I can. The presets aren't perfect though, so if I go to this heart shape, even if I kind of like pull this down, you can see that it's not like a perfect heart by any means. So you still might have to edit it a little bit. Some of the shapes, some of these presets aren't really going to do us any good, like this shape here, apply. Again, you'll see it kind of pretty messed up in there. So a lot of the presets won't really help us too much, especially like these stars and stuff like that. We're never, these type of designs aren't really going to look too good like that. But I can, there is a way, like fitting text to different shapes and stuff like that. There kind of is a way to do that. So I'll try to run through that at the end as well. But some good presets, the boxes that you see here, the oval might work a little bit, but I don't know if the circle is going to be as nice. Yeah, the oval shape next to it definitely works a little bit nicer. The banner works really well. So that's a nice little banner shape, so that's already preset for you. So there's a couple that we could definitely use. For the most part, we're probably going to be shaping the envelopes ourselves, though, using these presets, or not the presets, but the options down here. So again, the straight line, I can pull up this side here, pull this side down. It's just going to keep it a nice straight line. The next one is going to be our single arc. So that's going to just leave it more as the arc or rounded shape. So if I bring this middle up, you can see how it looks real nice like that. Same thing here. Now when we're using these envelope shapes, in Corel we can use, I was trying to follow you, but my envelope docker is grayed out. Belina, with that, if you select an object or a text and then look at it, it should become ungray. So right now you can see how mine's grayed out like this. So you actually have to select an object first, and then you should be able to click add new, select your option down here, and then these boxes around it is what I can control. Now when we're working in Corel, we always have shift and control sometimes will give us kind of not special or hidden features, but just extra features. So when I hold control and I pull this bottom up, you can see how the top line wants to go with it. So control, if I pull this one down while I'm holding control, it just kind of follows the shape. So if I pull this one up, the top goes up. If I pull the bottom down, the top's going to come down with it. Shift is going to do the opposite. So if I pull down, the top is going to go up. If I pull the bottom up, the top is going to go down. So this is how you can get different squeeze looks and stuff like that by messing with Control and Shift. So I can make this one a little skinnier, hold Shift, bring it out, and now I have a nice arc like that. So if you have a design, we had a question come in, can you add envelopes to a design or shape or something that's already has an envelope? Yes. What I wouldn't recommend though is when you already add a shape to your design like this, if you want to change it, what you don't want to do is select your design and click Add New again. Because what that does is right now, if I were to just double click on my design, you'll actually see that blue box around it. So that's our envelope shape. So right now, where these lines are is where my text is. So if I pull this line up a bit, that's where my text is going to go now. If I pull this side over, that's where my text is going to go. So if you hit Add New, it throws a brand new box around your design. So now if I try to add it, if my line's down here, that doesn't necessarily mean these lines are going to match up to my design now. So you kind of are just winging it at this point and hoping that it looks good when we don't actually know where those lines are gonna be. So if you already have a shape that has an envelope applied to it or anything like that, just double click it and then you can come back and completely edit the text if we need to. So when we click on these different sides, you can actually see these arrows coming off of them. So those are kind of shaping our text. When we're in the single straight line or double arc, we cannot control those arrows at all. So I can't, if I try to click on it, you can see it's not doing anything. So it's pretty much what we have is we can shape these, we can shape the design by grabbing the boxes around the outside. So if I grab this one, you can see how it's going to change the angle of my arrows coming off, but I can't simply grab that arrow and bring it down. So when I want complete control over my design or text or shape, that's when I'm going to use the unconstrained. So when I can switch this mid envelope or anything like that. Now that I'm in the unconstrained option, now if I were to select this shape or side here, I can completely take control and bring that arrow down here. I could bring this arrow up. I could bring this sideway down, bring this arrow up. So you can see you have complete control over your design. Now, that doesn't mean if I bend it like this or throw this way over here, your design's going to look really bad. Hey Jesse, welcome. So just because we have complete control over it doesn't mean if we can't mess it up or anything like that. But this, you can grab and shape this however you'd like. Can you go through the clear envelope button on the text effects tab? Yeah, so that's a little bit, with that, we could, on our actual TRW toolbar, you have this clear effect button right here. So that would clear your envelope too with just a click of a button. So that's going to be right here. So if I bring this down, this over, if I'm done or want to start over, I can just hit clear effect and that's just going to go right back to it. All right, so one tool that we kind of, when we're using our live templates and stuff like that, we also, one of the live text or envelope shapes get confused sometimes with a text to path. So when we add an envelope to a shape, so let me just, bend it like that. once it's in this shape, it's stuck. Our design is 12 inches right now, so if I come in here and I write the word basketball, it's still going to hold to that 12 inches up top here. A text to path is a little bit different. So if I had a circle here and I wanted the word basketball around this ball here, if I try to shape my envelope to go around it, you can see how that envelope shape does not look good once it's kind of arced that much. It starts to lose kind of pretty much the shape of it gets so skewed that it just doesn't look good, especially when you have such a round ball around it. It just isn't like a perfect circle shape. So what we want to do instead in this situation, if we want to add a text around an object like this, is I'll rewrite the word Mustangs. Impact. We can size it now, but you can actually size it after you apply it too. So it's not too big of a deal. Had one question come in. Can you, in an envelope, change left justify and center? Would it make a difference? Yes, it does. And I'll go over that in a second. So that's a good question. So here we have the Mustangs text. So under the text tab up top here, you'll see fit text to path. Or on your TRW toolbar, you'll have that same button here. So when you hover over your object, and I chose a circle just because, a lot of times we want to go around an object like that. This, when I hover over it, that red line means it's centered. But I don't have to have it centered. I can go, wherever I want around this design. When I left click, it'll just drop it right around my text like that. So if we want to go around an object like that, we're going to use the text to path rather than trying to bend or shape an envelope to fit around a circle like that. And if we want it around the bottom, you can notice that when I try to drag it, it goes upside down like that. So once we place that here, I can come up top here and do mirror text twice, and then pull that back down. And now it'll be on the bottom that way. So our last question was, when we're creating these envelopes, does it help to do a left, center, right, justify with the text? So if you want to set these up as a envelope that you can, create as a live template, it does matter. So what we can do in that case is, and there's a couple things that matter when we're creating a design that we want to eventually use as a live template. So one being, if I have the word Mustangs, I can use the same text, so I can go to my impact font, and up top here, I can use my center. Or I would want to select center. If I didn't, it's going to pretty much go to a left side. And what that does is, when we have an envelope shape like this, if I want to change the word to Mustangs to something else, let's say USA, that's where we're going to have an issue with a design like this, because I started with the word Mustangs and there's 8 characters. If I go to the word, and you can see in this edit text box, it's already to the left hand side. So if I type USA, it doesn't get all the way across my shape now, because this is only 3 characters instead of 8. So if you want to create your own text without using the wizard to create like an envelope like that, that's when we used to do the 3 eyes. So we would start it out with just 3 basic eyes. We would do the impact font and center justification, and then you can just kind of shape this however you want. So I can do add new, shape this. Now again, it just looks like 3 blocks right now, But now, because I started with the 3 letters and I did the center justification, now you can throw any characters in here. So if I have the word USA, it fits perfectly now. Or I could put in the word Mustangs, and that's going to fit perfectly too. So that's kind of when it's going to matter to use that left or center. And most of the time you'll just use the center. But if you have the software, those text, you would just use the text effects tab. And when you did that, let's just say I created that shape, hit apply. It's already going to, those steps that we just did, the 3 eyes, the center justification, it does all that when it sets this up. So it doesn't matter what text we put in this box, 3 letters or, 9 or 10 are still going to look the same. But using our text just like we did here, using our envelope, now we can create like a simple design like we have here. So I can just add my contour. Have that set up just like that. Go ahead and center that. Have my Lakewood Ranch text here. Go ahead and center that, and I'm just raising it. And does everyone know how to see how I'm keeping this perfectly in line? Does everyone know how I'm doing this and keeping this perfectly in line? So when I center this Lakewood Ranch text and I want to move it up and it stays perfectly in line like that. So when we do that, when I start, now you can move it first, but once you hold shift and start moving this, it's going to keep it perfectly in line to where it started. So I can only go straight up and down or left and right. So when you see a center and then just pull up perfectly straight, that's me holding shift to make sure that it comes straight up like that. Then I'm just going to click Add New, raise this side up just to give it a little dome arch there. And then just using a couple tools, we'll use our rectangle, shape, just round those out. Bring them down here, make them just a little bit skinnier. Make a copy on each side. And I'll just throw a couple stars in here too. So we got that set up there. And now I could just add any sport I wanted. So I go to my live templates, add artwork, and let's say basketball. Grab my basketball. And then I have my brand new design. So just by shaping a couple text, we can, and rounding out some rectangles, we can make a pretty unique design just like that. Can you create your own custom envelopes and save them for later use? So with the text effects tab, we can add our own. So by creating like a shape, like if you have a rectangle here and you shape your envelope, So let's just say I want this shape. That's where I can hit add and add it into our software here. So we actually have a whole text effect webinar where I actually went over adding it and setting up your own. But that's how you could save envelope shapes that you've created. Just in Corel, I'll have to double check on that. Have not. Yeah, I'll have to double check on that, on the adding it just in Corel. But I'll definitely check on that one. Yeah, because the only reason I'm thinking you might be able to, because a lot of the features in the software are, you know, part of Corel or coded to use Corel and stuff like that. So I'm wondering if there's a way to save the envelopes without it, but I've never done that before, so I'll try to figure that out for you for sure. No problem. Okay, so we did have the one question about like shaping text to certain shapes and stuff like that, where like we had the star. So the best scenario for that, and Mustangs might be kind of a big word to use this with, but sometimes what we'll see with that is, we'll go ahead and center both of these. So with our text, what I try to do is just kind of make it almost as tall as most of the objects here. Obviously we have some points here and some lower points here, so you could actually even bring it down a little bit more. But the first thing we're going to do is weld our text, and then let's add our star shape behind it. So now when you highlight your design, you can double click on it, and those are going to be the nodes. So you can actually bring those down, and this is where it gets a little tricky because you kind of have to edit this a little bit yourself. And I'd pull this side way up, and then you'd have to match this side here. And you can actually go a little bit outside of the star because at the end you can use the intersect feature. But this is a lot of times how you'll see those designs where they're not an actual envelope shape, but they're shaped like this to match through your object. So you can see how I shaped that M with the star now. So same thing here. And again, just leave it a little bit to the outside of it because that's when you can use the intersect feature anyways. So you can almost, depending on the shape and the letter, we'll do that just like that. I'll pull it down just a little bit more so it kind of goes a little bit through it. And this is where it kind of gets a little tricky too, so you know how far you want it to go down. Also, you might have to pull a little bit down this way. So we can bring this top down a bit too. see if we can pull this side down first. So we'll go all the way up there. Don't need the T. So I'll drag that down. And then if I drag this S down a little bit this way, ooh, not looking too good on the S. But something like that. Yeah, this is where it's not very fun, this type of design. Because it really takes a lot too of you deciding how you kind of want it to look and everything like that, how far up you want it to go and everything like that. So once you get through the rest, you can use the intersect, and that's where it's going to just leave those parts right over top of it on this area. But I'm not going to go through the whole thing on this one in particular, but we do have a webinar about, I think I did one with the Texas design and everything like that too. But that's where you're really, it's a little bit more about you deciding what you want it to look like, plus your customer's input too of how much you want it to, go through the star. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up tonight's webinar. Did you guys have any additional questions on any of the Corel features or anything else in general? Excuse me. So we had one question. How do you get rid of the black outline on the star? So in Corel, when you're working with different shapes and objects, excuse me, it will put an outline around your object. So this one's just this black outline here. You can get rid of it by hitting none up top here, or if you right click a color on any of these color palettes, that is actually how you can add that outline color too. So it's usually just a black outline like that. Or if you right click this X up here, it'll get rid of that outline too. Now this, by right clicking this design, this is not doing anything cut wise for your design. Even if you made this hairline that thick, this right now, if you send it to your cutter, it's going to simply read this as a one color design. So when you have these like hairline or these outline width, when you adjust them or anything like that, all that is just showing you the outline of your design. It's not technically there. So if you wanted it there, that's when you'd have to convert outline to an object, and that would break that as one piece, and then your other stars or the red piece as a separate piece. The first series of this webinar is already up on our YouTube channel. In the most recent videos, it'll say Corel Part 1. Appreciate that, Carol. Thank you, Donna. How do you center items with each other? So you can, the easiest way for that, I would just highlight and hit P as in Paul, and that will just center both of them right to your workspace. This one will be up, I'll have this one up for sure by tomorrow. I think, John, with this one here, I would just add a node and just highlight those two and delete them, and then that would make that a pointed pointed there, if that's what you're looking at. Sorry, I just had a couple questions come in. When you open a new document, you have the option to make it a template. How do you do it, and what is it used for? So it probably, Joseph, with the template, it's probably just saving your certain settings to your page. So I think I actually have mine set up where when you hit new, it would open up like a new little thing that says, here's your dimensions for your page and everything like that. I always leave it to default, which I think is like 8.5 by 11. You can set your page up to whatever size and stuff you want. So at the bottom of that little question, it says like, do not ask again. So I just hit that do not ask again. So if I open up a new page, it's just going to be a standard 8.5 by 11 page. But that to me, it doesn't really matter because I'll adjust this anyways at the end to fit my design. So you'll see some people will set it to like preset it to 12 by 12 and stuff like that, so it's a little bit bigger. But when you hit new, mine just opens right to an 8.5 by 11, just because I hit that do not ask again. Yeah, on the centering two objects, if you have the design wizard on the edit tab, you have these buttons up top here, the line, which you can just center two objects as well. So if you were just working and wanted those two objects centered, we have that set up as well on the edit tab. You can't actually save your designs in the wizard. You would just save them to, a certain just file, save as, and then a certain file type, or, in your documents or your desktop, wherever you have your files. Now, if you create a live template and you want that added into your existing live templates, you can save it to that folder, but otherwise you would just, save it to, some people have, businesses as separate folders, or different clients and stuff, or you can just have a mass folder where you save everything in there. I would just try to make it as like descriptive as possible. So with this design here, if I was saving this design here, I would do Tampa Bay Soccer template 1 or Tampa Bay Hurricane Soccer, stuff like that. So it's really specific, so when I research that, it comes up. Just want to make sure I get all these questions real quick. Can you explain a little about the connection between Corel to a silhouette or a silhouette cameo? So the connection between Corel and a cameo is one. Well, you have two different connections. One, you can design in Corel, and then if you're using the Silhouette Cameo and you either have the Designer Edition or Business Edition software, you can export from Corel as an SVG file and then import that into your Silhouette Cameo. Now, if you there's also another way to connect to the Cameo, which is by the Silhouette Connect. So that's a plugin to your Cameo from CorelDRAW. So up here in this little launch area, I do have the Corel Connect. So you would select that here, and it would open up a little window that you could then cut from. It's pretty much, if you have the Corel Connect or the Silhouette Connect, it simply just allows you to cut from Corel. It doesn't actually, once you're, it's not really a design platform or anything like that. It's just a plugin to cut. So the silhouette, if you have the business or designer edition, it's kind of nicer because if you ever have to, let's say I send you a design as a SVG and you want to change something about it, you still have that ability. Where if you just had the connect, I guess in Corel you could still edit if needed, but it's pretty much just you're gonna just cut right from it. For the scan and cut brother, I'm not sure if there's a plugin for that. I believe I was helping someone the other week with that, and we just did the export as a SVG and then brought it in. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I'm getting a couple other people saying that there's just SVG. Um, uh, what was about Corel Paint? You said something about that earlier. With the Corel Paint, all I was saying about that is sometimes with these extra like bitmaps and some of these modes where it has the black and white, the grayscale, all this extra stuff. Um, with the silhouette, the software, the Corel, I mixed it up. With the Corel software, the full graphic suite, it actually comes with all these extra like Corel Paint. Let me pull up that over here. So it has like Corel Capture, Corel Paint, all these little features of Corel. I'm not 100% sure, but what I thought is if you don't have the paint installed, because when you install Corel the first time, it'll ask you, do you want all these little extras, Corel Paint and the other little ones installed too? If you don't have to install them, but I think in order to use some of those like black and white features and stuff like that, you have to have that installed with it. I'm pretty sure, but if you have the full graphic suite of Corel, you have Corel Photo with Paint and everything like that. So you most likely installed it all at the same time. When you install it, it unless for some reason you told it not to, it should have installed all of it. Yeah, as a default, correct. Yeah, and we had a couple people say you do need the paint to edit the bitmaps. We had a question. Live templates means it's editable. Yes. The live templates is where you take a design, kind of like this Tampa Bay Hurricanes, is once you set it up in the envelope shape, you can come back through and retype Hurricanes. Instead of Hurricanes, you can type out any mascot or anything like that. Now, because we did Hurricanes and it was such a big word, that's when we'd have to start with those 3 eyes and stuff like that. But if I did Lakewood Mustangs, that's a bigger word, so that will fit fine through there. Yes, live templates can do the text to path, so it's the same way. You can, once it's on that path, you can edit the same way. Is there a way to get colors in Corel Design to transfer correctly into Silhouette Studio? With that, it's most likely just going to be selecting the same color palettes. I'm not sure what Silhouette Studio uses as their color palette, but under Window, you'll see color palettes, and you'll see default, the CMYK, or RGB. So it might just be simply like Silhouette uses RGB colors. So if I bring in the RGB palette, then these colors will probably match a little bit nicer. Yeah, but when you hover over these colors, you can see the RGB, how this one says 179, 179, 179, or that number B3, B3, B3. Sometimes you can search them that way too, or plug those, like type those in specifically to match, and that helps too. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We do have the in-house training So yeah, so thank you, Libby. You can enter the RGB values into the Silhouette Studio, so you should be able to match them. Just use the RGB palette, and then you should be able to enter in that way. So I probably won't have another one this week. Just we have an in-house crew this week, so we're gonna be a little bit busy with that. But I know Matt's still gonna do some of the giveaway, nightly webinars and lives and stuff like that. So definitely check those out. Sweet, can't wait to see you, Carol. But thank you guys so much. We had a packed house. Really appreciate everyone coming. I know David, you can now go watch the Home Run Derby if you're still in here. But yeah, I had an alert come on my phone, so I know it started. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys again. Anyone that's coming, we'll see you guys Wednesday. All right, have a great night. Thanks.